I don't know how many of you watch my video day of, but if you are, Merry Christmas. I know I usually post on Fridays, and this year, Christmas is on a Friday, so Merry Christmas, Happy Christmas, whatever. If you're not watching this on the day of, happy whatever day. So today I'm going to be doing my typical review, and I'm going to be reviewing Kingdom of the Wicked, which we got in the October Fairy Loot box. Just to real quick give a kind of neutral summary, that way you can know if the book is even going to be interesting to you or not. We follow a young witch whose name is Amelia, who after some tragedy befalls her family, starts to look more into the dark arts and the dark side of witchcraft. Her grandmother always told her stories about these very spooky demon princes and all these other terrible things that go bump in the night, but she didn't believe her until now. So if that sounds at all interesting to you, the rest of my review is going to be talking about some more kind of sensitive areas, or areas that might trip up like less experienced readers, or things that people have sensitivities to. And then I'll end it with my opinionated summary that I'll try to keep short because I did do a read along where I shared a lot of my opinions. Alright, so the first thing that I always like to start with is a pretty simple but effective metric to know if you would feel comfortable reading this book or not, and that is the amount of and types of point of views. I feel like that's something that can trip up a less experienced reader. If you've got a vast fantasy, looking at you, Game of Thrones, where you seldom follow the same character, there are so many names, so many points of views, it can get really confusing. This is not one of those. The first chapter does start from the point of view of Amelia's grandmother, and it's in third person. Yes, her grandmother's account is in third person past tense, whereas hers is in first person present tense. So while we do technically have two narrators, one is for such a small amount of time, I don't think that it would trip up even less experienced readers. So this section is going to be really short because there's nothing that I could feel right in saying is like a social complexity about this book at all. There's a bit of she has to reconcile that her family and their traditions and who they are aren't really accepted by the church, but it doesn't even focus on it that much. The only social issue kind of thing is that bad and evil are all relative. Everybody has their own different motivating factors for different things, and so these princes of hell and these demon princes might not really be that bad. They just have very certain wants. That's the only thing that I could think of, and it's not even that prevalent. Poppy's back again. Hi, Puppy. You can't have that. That's my drink. To wait for the beast to leave. Okay, I'm gonna put you in there with Papa. Go see Papa. Alright, so for the romance element, I feel like this could have been in the enemies to lovers box. Her love interest is this demon, and she's like, oh, he's disgusting, I could never like him. But, of course they grow closer together. It doesn't really seem that romantic, other than her kind of having some lustful thoughts about just how handsome and perfect he is. But, I mean, it makes sense. They keep saying that he's pretty much akin to an angel, so I would imagine pretty perfect and so pretty hot. There are two bath scenes, which I found really fan servicey, which is fine if you like that sort of thing. I don't in particular, but anyway, there are two bath scenes, but nothing is really described and they don't get up to anything. The most romantic and kind of steamy thing is there is a very passionate kiss towards the end where she mentions his hand on her thigh and that it's going upwards, and that did kind of make me, ooh, where's this going? But things break off shortly after that, so nothing any more intimate than that. Right, next up is the violence section. The demon that she befriends and kind of has a romance with is called Wrath. All the demon princes are focused around the 7 deadly sins. Being paired up with Wrath, you would imagine that there's a fair amount of bloody things happening. This book strikes the chord of bloody things happen, but they are not described in a gross way. I'm usually a little sensitive on this subject, and I didn't have any trouble reading this book, but some very bloody things happen. There is a murderer out. That's what starts her doing her investigations and whatnot. This thing that's murdering is ripping hearts out of chests. So pretty bloody stuff. And she sees at least 2 victims, I think maybe even 3. So there are those elements. She ends up in a fight with like this giant monster thing. Actually, she ends up in 2 separate fights with 2 big scary monster things. One she kills and gets a little bloody, and it did give me a minute of, oh, but again, it wasn't that bad. And then the second one, Wrath kills it for her, but there's still a little bit of blood. That one, I didn't really feel anything about. And then the last one was, again, probably the most gory. I think it's kind of typical for a lot of books, but definitely for this book, it kind of seemed to be slowly scaling things up. And so in the same way that she had her steamiest scene towards the end of the book, there was also the grossest scene. Like I said, she's seen some dead bodies. She's even seen some things be killed in front of her, but she sees somebody get disemboweled, and there are enough lines of descriptions about it that I was reading very fast, looking forward to the end of that. But again, I consider myself a little sensitive to that sort of thing, and I didn't have too much trouble with it, so I think it should still be relatively safe. You know, I would just say maybe don't read this book to like children, but like teenagers would be fine. Alright, so now for the more long-winded part of my review where I share my opinionated version. So as I spoke about earlier in the video, I'm going to try and keep this short because I have another video very full of my opinions and spoiler-free because that other video is full of spoilers. I want to start off by saying that I love Maniscalco's writing. She writes a very good, like, atmospheric story. Although I don't think they ever specify the date, I think they mention Sicily in here. I don't know if it's relative, like they're pretty close, or if she's saying that's where they are. Whether that's where they are or not, there's a lot of what I thought was Spanish, but I guess Spanish and Italian are pretty close. I don't know. The family runs like a restaurant, and it seems like that kind of cuisine, so I could really feel the location in that sense, and I felt the time kind of in the mode of dress and the description of like the streets and the houses and stuff like that. So Maniscalco does a great job at really like telling you where you are without telling you where you are. 2, I've read another one of her books. It's the Stalking Jack the Ripper. I have on my to-read list the other books in that series, but so far I've only read the first one since this one came in the Fairy Loot box. I got to it probably sooner than I would have otherwise. But because I enjoyed Stalking Jack the Ripper so much, I had high expectations for this. Maniscalco did a very great job of writing a mystery in that other book, and the pacing was good, and it felt like she was discovering more clues all along the way, really making progress, and then she figures out the mystery in the end. And it didn't feel like Amelia really did that. It kind of felt like there was a repetition of someone tells Amelia, "Hon, you can't go out there, it's not safe." And she goes, "Oh, I'm gonna go out there because I want to figure things out for myself, and I'm independent." And then she would usually fail or get into trouble, and then someone would have to rescue her. Which actually I found really disappointing because the first time that she went out, she runs into the demon Greed. And I think technically first she runs into Envy, they have a short conversation where he seems really sus. And then she goes off to find Greed and has a conversation with him, where she does this really clever thing. And that gave me really high expectations for her as a character, yet it never really seemed to follow through. After that instance, everything else just seemed to happen to her. But how she meets these princes and how she kind of gets embroiled in all this dark magic is there are some murders happening around her and like the witch community. And so she decides to investigate, and she wants to figure out who this murderer is. And that's how she starts all of this. Yet, after she summons the Prince of Hell and finds out about all these things going on in Hell and all these different interactions with like the other princes of Hell, it seems like that's more so where the emphasis is. That we need to figure out who's trying to steal the throne from Pride and like stop them, because Wrath seems to want to do that, and that seems like that's why Wrath is helping her find out who the murderer is. But it even starts to feel like towards the end of the book, she's more worried about finding out why Wrath is doing what he's doing and what that's going to mean for the rest of the world, because this curse could mean that the gates of Hell open up and demons just have free reign over our world, and that's not nice. So it seems like she's working to stop that, and the murderer thing just kind of falls by the wayside. So when this book ends with unveiling who the killer is, I didn't really care. Honestly, it reads as if she was trying to write one book and couldn't fit it all into one book, so broke it up into 2 books. You can tell that there's going to be a book 2, because Amelia, I don't even know if it would be right to say she decides. She is okay with, she lets it happen, where she goes to hell. I like the characters enough. It reads like an enemies to lovers relationship, except they kind of come off as enemies, but mostly only because Amelia says that. They really work together the whole time, and he seems like he's trying to be polite, if not even nice. I think he even says that, like, we're princes of hell. Like, we're held to have good manners. So, I mean, yes, he is still a demon of wrath, and so he can act a little rough. But, like, I don't think it's ever towards her, other than, like, the kind of banter that enemies to lovers have. But I like the characters well enough. I like Wrath more. Amelia feels a little too much like a Mary Sue. I kind of like their banter. It was a little annoying sometimes, a little charming other times, but partially because of the overarching plot of what's going on in hell, and partially because I like the characters. I'll still be picking up book 2, even though I wasn't that enthralled with book 1. But yeah, so that is my review for Kingdom of the Wicked by Kerri Maniscalco. A kind of too long didn't watch, just summation here at the end is that the writing is great. Maniscalco is a great atmospheric writer, and she handles violence and intimacy rather well, where the characters can still experience those things, but it doesn't make a reader uncomfortable. This book should be palatable for even younger readers. With how many violent things happen, regardless of how detailed they are or not, I probably still would recommend at least someone teenaged or like on the cusp, like 11 or 12. You probably wouldn't want to read it to a child. It's still a pretty safe read, and honestly, I would probably even recommend sticking between that, between younger to like middling teenager. Because just some of the other tropes and actions, and there is a lot of fan service and all of that, that kind of had me leaning towards thinking I would have enjoyed it if I would have read it a few years ago. But I don't know if I would actively recommend this or not. The writing is really good, the characters are pretty fun, but I found some elements of the plot to be very lacking. I would say if you like dark, witchy, demony, very atmospheric feels, this book could be good. If you're kind of tired of the whole enemies to lovers kind of thing, or the kind of be really mad at not being able to figure out a mystery, because Maniscalco doesn't really give you any hints within the book. It's more of just a, I know these trends from reading and watching so many mysteries that's probably how it was gonna go, but she doesn't give you any clues. So if you're the kind to be annoyed by enemies to lovers or not being able to figure out a mystery, it might not be a good read for you. So I just want to say thank you so much for watching through the whole video. It really means a lot, and I hope you're having a swell day. Bye for now.